Drone captures the exact moment girl was taken. 13 years later, the shocking truth is revealed. Narrated by investigative journalist Michael Harrison, the Appalachian Trail stretches over 2,190 miles through 14 states, from Georgia to Maine. It's a ribbon of wilderness that attracts over 3 million visitors each year, hikers seeking adventure, families creating memories, and photographers capturing America's raw beauty. But on a crisp October morning in 2011, this iconic trail would become the backdrop for a mystery that would haunt the nation for 13 long years. My name is Michael Harrison, and I've spent the last 2 decades covering missing persons cases across America. I've seen families torn apart by uncertainty, communities united in search efforts, and occasionally, just occasionally, I've witnessed the impossible, a resolution that nobody saw coming. This is one of those stories. A story that began with cutting-edge technology capturing something nobody was meant to see, and ended with a revelation that would challenge everything we thought we knew about family, truth, and the lengths people will go to protect the ones they love. It started with a drone, one of those early commercial models that hobbyists were just beginning to experiment with back in 2011. Tom Bradley was a retired engineer from Asheville, North Carolina, who'd purchased his first quadcopter that summer. He was fascinated by the aerial perspectives it could capture, especially over the stunning landscape of the Blue Ridge Mountains where the Appalachian Trail winds through North Carolina. On October 15, 2011, Tom drove to Craggy Gardens, a popular section of the trail known for its panoramic views and rhododendron tunnels. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, temperature in the low 60s, with the fall foliage at its absolute peak. Tom told me years later that he'd chosen that particular Saturday morning because the lighting would be ideal for aerial photography. He had no idea that his hobby would accidentally document one of the most baffling disappearances in American history. At approximately 9:47 a.m., Tom's drone was hovering about 200 feet above a section of trail near the craggy pinnacle overlook. Through his controller's display, he was focusing on capturing the sea of orange and gold leaves when something else entered the frame. A young girl, maybe 11 or 12 years old, wearing a bright purple jacket that stood out against the autumn colors. She was walking alone on the trail, which immediately struck Tom as odd. Even from that height, he could see she was moving slowly, almost reluctantly. Tom adjusted the drone's position to get a better angle of the scenic vista, inadvertently keeping the girl in frame. That's when he captured it, the moment that would later become crucial evidence. A figure emerged from the tree line about 50 feet behind the girl. The person was wearing dark clothing and moved with deliberate purpose. Within seconds, they had caught up to the girl. There was a brief interaction, maybe 30 seconds, before both figures disappeared into the dense forest on the eastern side of the trail. At the time, Tom thought nothing of it. From his elevated perspective, it looked like a parent catching up with their child, perhaps calling them back from wandering too far ahead. He continued filming for another 20 minutes before his battery ran low and he had to land. He went home that afternoon, uploaded the footage to his computer, and didn't think about the purple-jacketed girl again. Not until 3 days later, when the news broke. Emma Chen, 12 years old, had been reported missing from a family camping trip in the Pisgah National Forest, just miles from where Tom had been flying his drone. The Chen family, parents David and Sarah, along with Emma and her younger brother Lucas, had been staying at the Black Mountain campground. According to the initial reports, Emma had gone for an early morning walk on October 15th and never returned. The search effort was immediate and massive. Park rangers, local law enforcement, FBI agents, and hundreds of volunteers combed through miles of wilderness. Search dogs tracked Emma's scent from the campground to the trail, but lost it near Craggy Gardens, exactly where Tom had been filming. When Tom saw Emma's photo on the news, especially when they mentioned the purple North Face jacket she'd been wearing, his blood ran cold. He immediately contacted the authorities and handed over his drone footage. For the first time, investigators had visual evidence of what might have happened to Emma Chen. But instead of providing answers, the footage only deepened the mystery. The figure who approached Emma was completely unidentifiable. They wore a black hooded jacket, dark pants, and what appeared to be hiking boots. The resolution wasn't clear enough to determine gender, age, or any distinguishing features. Enhanced analysis by the FBI's technical team revealed that the person was approximately 5'8" to 5'10" tall, with an average build. The interaction between Emma and this person didn't appear violent or forced, at least not from the drone's perspective. Emma seemed to follow the figure willingly into the woods. This detail tormented David and Sarah Chen. Their daughter was a cautious child, they insisted. She would never go with a stranger. She knew the rules, had been taught about stranger danger since she was small. Sarah Chen told reporters, her voice breaking. Emma was shy. She wouldn't even order her own food at restaurants. The idea that she would just walk off with someone she didn't know, it doesn't make sense. The investigation expanded rapidly. Every registered camper within a 50-mile radius was interviewed. Trail registers were examined. Cell phone towers were analyzed for any devices in the area. The FBI brought in their child abduction rapid deployment team, specialists who had worked on hundreds of missing children cases. But the Appalachian Trail, for all its beauty, is a challenging environment for an investigation. Cell service is spotty at best. The trail attracts thousands of hikers, many of whom value their privacy and don't register at official checkpoints. The wilderness is vast, with countless places where someone could disappear and never be found. David Chen, a software engineer from Raleigh, threw himself into the search with an intensity that worried even the investigators. He took indefinite leave from his job, spent his family's savings on private investigators, and created a sophisticated database tracking every tip and potential sighting. He analyzed Tom's drone footage frame by frame, convinced there was some detail everyone was missing. Sarah Chen took a different approach. She became the public face of the search, appearing on national news programs, organizing vigils, and maintaining a Facebook page that would eventually gather over 300,000 followers. Someone knows something, she would say in every interview. Someone saw my baby. Please, if you have any information, no matter how small, please come forward. The tips poured in. Emma was supposedly seen in truck stops from Tennessee to Maine. A girl matching her description was reported at a McDonald's in Virginia, a Walmart in Pennsylvania, a rest area in Georgia. Each sighting was investigated. None led to Emma. As weeks turned to months, the official search scaled back. The FBI maintained Emma's case as active, but the dozens of agents were reduced to a handful. The volunteers went home. The news cycle moved on to other tragedies, but the Chen family never stopped searching. David became obsessed with the figure in the drone footage. He hired digital forensics experts to enhance the images. He studied gait analysis, trying to match the person's walking pattern to anyone in Emma's life. He investigated every registered sex offender within 500 miles. He traced the purchase history of black hooded jackets sold in North Carolina that year. His marriage began to fracture under the weight of his obsession. Sarah, meanwhile, channeled her grief into advocacy. She lobbied for better emergency response systems in national parks. She worked with other families of missing children. She held on to hope with a determination that some called inspiring and others called heartbreaking. Their son Lucas, only 8 when Emma disappeared, grew up in the shadow of his missing sister. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family milestone was marked by Emma's absence. He later told me that he felt like he had lost not just his sister, but his parents too. One to obsession, one to advocacy, both to grief. The years passed with agonizing slowness. 2012, 2013, 2014. Each anniversary brought a flurry of renewed media attention, but no new leads. The drone footage, once seen as the key to solving the case, became a source of frustration. How could they have visual evidence of Emma's abduction and still know nothing? In 2016, 5 years after Emma's disappearance, a potential breakthrough emerged. A woman in West Virginia contacted authorities claiming she had seen a teenage girl who looked like an age-progressed photo of Emma. The girl was living with a couple in a remote cabin near the Monongahela National Forest. The FBI descended on the location, but found only an empty cabin that had been abandoned for months. The trail went cold again. David Chen's obsession intensified. He became convinced that Emma was being held somewhere along the Appalachian Trail itself. He spent months hiking different sections, showing Emma's photo to everyone he met. Other hikers began to recognize him, the haunted-looking man with the laminated photos and the desperate questions. Trail angels, volunteers who help hikers, would offer him food and shelter, moved by his dedication even as they worried about his deteriorating mental state. Sarah tried to get David help, but he refused. Their marriage, already strained, finally collapsed in 2017. The divorce was quiet, overshadowed by the greater tragedy that had defined their lives for 6 years. Lucas, now 14, chose to live with his mother. David moved into a small apartment in Asheville, closer to where Emma had disappeared. By 2020, Emma Chen's case had become one of those unsolved mysteries that true crime podcasters and amateur detectives regularly revisited. The drone footage had been analyzed thousands of times by armchair investigators. Theories ranged from human trafficking to Emma running away to join a cult. Some even suggested she had never been abducted at all, that she had orchestrated her own disappearance. This last theory was particularly painful for the Chen family. The idea that Emma had chosen to leave them was almost worse than believing she had been taken. Sarah Chen addressed it directly in a 2021 interview. Emma loved us. She was happy. She had friends, she did well in school, she had dreams and plans. 12-year-old girls don't just decide to disappear. But then, in March 2024, everything changed. A hiker named Jennifer Morrison was exploring an off-trail area near Mount Mitchell, about 30 miles from where Emma had disappeared. She was geocaching, a kind of treasure hunting using GPS coordinates, when she stumbled upon something unusual. Hidden behind a cluster of boulders was a small cave, and inside that cave was evidence of human habitation. Old camping equipment, weathered notebooks, and carved into the soft stone of the cave wall, a message. EC was here. 2011-2024. I'm sorry. Jennifer immediately contacted park rangers, who in turn contacted the FBI. The cave was processed as a crime scene. The notebooks, though damaged by years of exposure, contained entries that appeared to be written by Emma Chen. They described years of living in the wilderness, moving between hidden shelters, surviving on foraged food and supplies taken from trail caches. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. DNA analysis of hair samples found in the cave confirmed they belonged to Emma Chen. She had been alive at least until recently. But where was she now? And who had been helping her? Because one thing was clear from the evidence. A 12-year-old girl couldn't have survived alone in the wilderness for 13 years. The investigation took on new urgency. Every shelter, cave, and abandoned structure within a 100-mile radius was searched. Trail cameras were installed at strategic points. Tips flooded in from hikers who thought they might have seen someone matching Emma's description over the years. A wild-looking young woman who appeared occasionally at the edges of campgrounds, who sometimes took food from hiker boxes at trail stops. Then, on September 3, 2024, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lucas Chen, now 21 and a college student studying environmental science, contacted the FBI. He had something to tell them, something he had kept secret for 13 years. On the morning Emma disappeared, he hadn't been asleep in the tent like everyone believed. He had followed his sister on her walk. What Lucas revealed in his FBI interview sent shockwaves through everyone who had followed the case. Emma hadn't been abducted, she had run away. And the figure in the drone footage, the person everyone had been trying to identify for over a decade, was their mother's younger brother, Uncle Marcus. Marcus Liu had been estranged from the family for years due to what Sarah Chen had described as philosophical differences. In reality, Marcus had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in his 20s and had rejected treatment, choosing instead to live off-grid in the mountains. He believed modern society was toxic, that children were being poisoned by technology and processed foods, that the only pure way to live was in harmony with nature. Emma, according to Lucas, had been in secret contact with Uncle Marcus for months before the camping trip. She was going through a difficult time, bullying at school, pressure to excel academically, the general turmoil of approaching adolescence. Marcus had filled her head with ideas about living free, about escaping the artificial constraints of modern life. Lucas had seen them meet on the trail that morning. He had watched his sister walk away with their uncle, and he had said nothing. I was 8 years old, Lucas told investigators, his voice heavy with 13 years of guilt. Emma made me promise not to tell. She said she would come back when she was ready. She said if I told anyone, Uncle Marcus would get in trouble, maybe go to jail. I didn't understand what it would do to our family. The secret had eaten at Lucas for years. He had watched his parents' marriage dissolve, seen his father lose himself to obsession, witnessed his mother's desperate hope slowly transform into resigned grief. He had wanted to tell the truth 1,000 times, but the weight of his childhood promise and the fear of what it would mean had kept him silent, until he found Emma. In the summer of 2024, Lucas had been conducting field research for his senior thesis in the Black Mountains. He had been drawn back to the area where his sister had disappeared, perhaps hoping to find some kind of closure. Instead, he found Emma herself. She was living in a carefully hidden camp about 15 miles from the Maine Trail. 25 years old now, weathered by years of outdoor living but unmistakably his sister. The reunion was emotional and complicated. Emma had been told by Marcus that her family had stopped looking for her, that they had moved on. She had no idea about the years of searching, the dissolved marriage, the international attention her case had received. Marcus had died 2 years earlier from untreated diabetes. Emma had been alone since then, surviving on the skills he had taught her but increasingly struggling with isolation and the physical demands of wilderness living. She was sick, malnourished, and according to Lucas, devastated to learn the truth about what her disappearance had done to their family. Lucas convinced Emma to come forward, but she was terrified. She had been a minor when she left, manipulated by an adult with untreated mental illness. But she had also chosen to stay hidden for years after becoming an adult. She didn't know if she would face legal consequences. More importantly, she didn't know if her parents could ever forgive her. On September 15, 2024, 13 years and 11 months after she disappeared, Emma Chen walked into the FBI field office in Charlotte, North Carolina. The reunion between Emma and her parents was private, closed to the media that had followed the story for so long, but those close to the family described it as simultaneously heartbreaking and healing. Sarah Chen later released a statement. "We have our daughter back. That's all that matters. The years we lost can never be recovered, but we have a chance at a future together. We ask for privacy as we learn to be a family again." David Chen's response was more complex. The man who had spent 13 years searching for his daughter, who had destroyed his life trying to find her, had to reconcile with the fact that she had chosen to stay away. Friends say he struggled with anger, relief, and a profound sense of waste. All those years of searching when Emma had been alive and hiding just miles from where she disappeared. The legal ramifications were minimal. Emma had been a minor when she left, clearly under the influence of an adult with mental illness. Marcus Liu, had he lived, would have faced serious charges. But Emma herself was treated as a victim. The resources spent searching for her, the FBI hours, the volunteer efforts, all of that was written off as the cost of protecting children, even from misguided family members. The psychological ramifications were more significant. Emma underwent months of therapy to readjust to modern life. 13 years of living in the wilderness had left her with severe social anxiety, PTSD, and a complicated relationship with technology and contemporary society. She had missed her entire teenage years, her education, the normal developmental milestones that shape a person. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Lucas. The weight of carrying that secret from age 8 to 21 had shaped his entire life. He had chosen to study environmental science partly to understand the world his sister had disappeared into. He had never had a normal relationship, always fearing that intimacy would lead to revealing his secret. He had lived with the guilt of watching his parents suffer, while knowing he held the key to ending their pain. The public reaction to the truth was mixed. Some were angry that Emma had allowed the search to continue for so long after she became an adult. Others were sympathetic, understanding that a 12-year-old manipulated by a mentally ill relative couldn't be held responsible, and that the subsequent years of isolation had created their own prison. The drone footage that had captivated amateur detectives for 13 years took on new meaning. Watching it now, knowing that the figure was Marcus Liu, Emma's uncle, the interaction looked different. What had seemed potentially sinister now appeared almost tender. A uncle collecting his niece for what he genuinely believed was a better life. Tom Bradley, the retiree whose drone had captured that crucial moment, reflected on the strange role he had played in the story. "I've thought about that morning so many times," he told me. "If I had been paying closer attention, if I had realized something was wrong, could I have prevented 13 years of agony? But then I remember, Emma wasn't really being abducted. She was making a choice, influenced and manipulated, yes, but still a choice. Maybe there was no preventing what happened." The case raised uncomfortable questions about family, mental illness, and the vulnerability of children to the adults they trust. Marcus Liu genuinely believed he was saving Emma from what he saw as a toxic modern world. Emma, a troubled preteen, had found his alternative appealing. The tragedy was not just in the years lost, but in the good intentions twisted by untreated mental illness. Today, the Chen family is slowly rebuilding. Emma, now 26, is working on getting her GED and has expressed interest in becoming a wilderness therapy counselor, using her unique experiences to help troubled youth. Lucas is pursuing a doctorate in psychology, specializing in the long-term effects of childhood trauma and secret-keeping. Sarah and David, while no longer married, have found a way to co-parent their adult children and support each other through the complex process of healing. The Appalachian Trail continues to draw millions of visitors each year. Most don't know that they're walking through the setting of one of America's strangest missing person cases. The trail shelters where Emma might have hidden, the overlooks where she might have watched hikers pass by, the streams where she gathered water. They bear no markers of the 13-year mystery that unfolded among them. But for those who followed Emma Chen's case, the trail holds different meanings now. It's a reminder that the wilderness can hide more than we imagine. That family bonds can be both the cause of our greatest pain and our only path to healing. That sometimes the most complex mysteries have heartbreakingly simple solutions. The drone footage still exists, archived in FBI files and scattered across the internet. Occasionally someone new discovers it and posts their theory about what really happened, not knowing that the truth has already been revealed. It serves as a strange monument to our age, a moment of private family tragedy accidentally captured by technology, analyzed by strangers and ultimately understood only when the principals chose to reveal their truth. As I conclude this investigation, I think about the nature of truth and how long it can stay hidden. Emma Chen was never really missing. She was hiding. Her family wasn't just searching for her. They were searching for answers that one member already possessed. The thousands of people who looked for Emma were part of a drama whose script had been written by mental illness, family dysfunction, and the terrible burden of secrets. The most haunting aspect of this case isn't the 13 years Emma spent in the wilderness. It's the 13 years Lucas spent in his own wilderness of guilt and silence. 2 children, both lost in different ways, both shaped irrevocably by a single morning's decision on a mountain trail. When people ask me what lesson can be drawn from Emma Chen's story, I struggle to answer. Perhaps it's that family mental health matters, that Marcus Liu's untreated schizophrenia created ripples that destroyed multiple lives. Perhaps it's about the vulnerability of children, how a 12-year-old's romantic notion of wilderness freedom could lead to such devastating consequences. Or perhaps it's simpler, that the truth, however painful, is ultimately less destructive than secrets. The Chen family's story isn't over. Healing from 13 years of trauma doesn't happen overnight. Emma still struggles with crowds and sleeps better outdoors than in. Lucas still wakes up sometimes thinking he needs to confess. Sarah and David still check their phones hoping for news, forgetting for a moment that their daughter has been found. But they're together now in whatever complicated form that takes. The drone that captured Emma's last moment as Emma Chen, 12-year-old missing child, also captured her first moment as someone else. A ghost in the wilderness, a keeper of secrets, a child who chose to disappear. The fact that she chose to reappear, to reclaim her identity and face the consequences, offers its own kind of hope. The Appalachian Trail stretches on, indifferent to human drama, marking the boundary between civilization and wilderness. Somewhere along its length there are still hidden shelters where Emma spent 13 years growing up in isolation. They stand as monuments to a peculiar tragedy, not of evil intention but of mental illness, miscommunication, and the terrible weight of childhood promises. As the sun sets over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in the same brilliant oranges and golds that Tom Bradley captured that October morning in 2011, the trail prepares for new stories. Hikers will pass through, families will camp, children will wander ahead of their parents. Most will return safely. But Emma Chen's story reminds us that sometimes, even when everyone is looking, someone can choose to stay lost. The drone footage remains, 57 seconds of video that launched a 13-year mystery. Technology captured the moment, but only human courage could reveal the truth. Emma Chen found the strength to come home. Lucas Chen found the strength to break his silence. And a family found that even the deepest wounds can begin to heal when the truth finally comes to light. In the end, that's what this story is really about. Not the mystery of a missing girl, but the mystery of human resilience. How people can survive 13 years in the wilderness, 13 years of searching, 13 years of keeping an impossible secret. How families can shatter and slowly, carefully begin to piece themselves back together. How truth, no matter how long it takes, eventually finds its way into the light. The shocking revelation wasn't that Emma Chen was alive. It was that she had never really been taken at all. She had been given a choice by someone who shouldn't have been trusted to make it, at an age when she couldn't fully understand the consequences. The real abduction was of her childhood, her education, her family's peace. The real crime was the silence that followed. But if there's hope in this story, it's this. Emma Chen came home. After 13 years in the wilderness, both literal and metaphorical, she found her way back. Her family, fractured and reformed, chose forgiveness over anger, healing over blame. They chose to look forward rather than back, to build something new from the ruins of what was lost. The drone continues to fly over the Appalachian Trail, now joined by hundreds of others as the technology has become commonplace. They capture the beauty of the mountains, the changing seasons, the hikers making their journeys. Sometimes, perhaps, they capture moments of significance, meetings and partings, decisions that will echo through years. But most of the time, they simply document the endless, ordinary miracle of life continuing, despite everything. Emma Chen's story reminds us that every missing person case is a human story, complex and nuanced beyond what any drone can capture. Behind every search effort, every age-progressed photo, every desperate family plea, there are layers of truth that may take years to surface. Sometimes the person we're searching for isn't really lost, they're hiding. And sometimes the hardest journey isn't into the wilderness, but back home. If you found this story compelling, please share it. Somewhere out there, another family is searching for answers. Another child is keeping a secret too heavy to bear. Another truth is waiting to be revealed. Sometimes sharing these stories is the first step toward bringing someone home. For more information about missing persons resources, visit the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at missingkids.org. This story, while dramatic in its telling, represents the very real pain of thousands of families with missing loved ones. If you have any information about a missing person case, no matter how old or seemingly insignificant, please contact your local FBI office or call 1-800-THE-LOST.